Picture this, a city sitting half a mile out to sea, ringed by walls taller than a 5-story building, and guarded by an unbeatable navy. That was Tyre. In 332 BC, Alexander showed up and said, "Surrender." The Tyrians laughed, until 7 months later. Their city was rubble, their navy was gone, and Alexander was standing on new land that used to be sea. One man basically told the ocean to move over. Alexander had just blitzed through half the Persian Empire. Every other port on the coast had already surrendered. They knew what no got you. Only Tyre dug in its heels. It controlled the cedar trade, the famous purple dye, and the last safe harbor for the Persian fleet. If Tyre stayed free, Alexander's supply line back to Macedon was a hostage. He marched to the coast and refused to acknowledge the small detail that it was, an island. Negotiations were short. The Tyrians told Alexander, "Feel free to sacrifice on the mainland," which was ancient speak for "stay away, tourist." Alexander replied he'd rather sacrifice inside the city. The gates slammed shut. The next morning, the causeway started. Engineers stripped the abandoned mainland suburb, stuffing rubble into baskets and dumping it all into the shallows. Anything that could hold sand was pitched into the water. Within weeks, the land bridge inched 200 meters toward the island. On the walls, Tyrians sharpened their weapons. Then the war truly started. Tyrian warships shot out of their harbor and carved through the work crews. Sailors hurled pots of burning sand, ancient napalm, while archers picked off engineers. Alexander threw up wooden barriers, cranked ballistae into position, and kept the causeway growing. Tyre escalated. They packed an old ship with cedar shavings, pitch, and brimstone, set it on fire, and rammed it straight into the Macedonian towers. The mold that had taken months to build evaporated in one smoky afternoon. Most generals would have quit. Alexander had no fleet and no time, so he rode south and assembled a new fleet of 200 ships from former enemies, all thrilled to trash their rival city. Tyre's navy still had skills, but Alexander's new armada had him. He bolted siege engines on deck and draped the ships in wet hides, turning them into floating siege towers. After 10 days of sea battles, the Tyrians retreated behind their walls for good, and the causeway crawled back to life. The final act was pure grind. Wagon-sized blocks slid into the sea, widening the mole until 4 horses could ride abreast. Alexander parked catapults on floating platforms, then on the mole itself, and finally on captured breakwaters. Stone throwers pounded the walls around the clock. When a section buckled, the Tyrians shoved boulders into the breach. The Macedonians answered with iron-plated battering rams and flaming arrows. Weeks blurred into months. Storms tore chunks from the mole. Alexander rebuilt overnight. Inside Tyre, spirits and food ran thin. On a calm dawn in the 7th month, Alexander ordered the final assault. From the east, siege towers rumbled down the mole. At the same moment, ships nosed up to the southern seawall, their gangplanks crashing down. The Tyrian defenders split their numbers, and the middle gave way. The first Macedonian inside shouted the signal. By noon, the fighting spilled into alleyways, where every rooftop was a sniper's nest. Alexander's furious soldiers didn't bother taking prisoners. 8,000 Tyrians were dead. The survivors were sold into slavery. The city that had never fallen was gone. Alexander sacrificed to Heracles on the ruins. Of course he did. Then rode across the new land where the sea used to be. That mole is still there today, a causeway silted over by centuries of sand. Tourists stroll out to the old island, walking on Alexander's temper. Tyre's harbor silted up, and its famous divans went cold. The siege became the textbook for impossible campaigns. If a man can turn an island into a peninsula, what fortress is truly safe? Alexander marched on, but every general after him remembered Tyre, and the simple, brutal lesson one man wrote in rock and blood. If the ground's missing, just build your own.